Linda, would you mind defining shadow work for us?
Well, we have two sides to our psyche. We have the conscious and the unconscious. And the unconscious is where everything gets buried, where the things that you fear in your life, the bad things that have happened to you in your life, the parts of you that just no longer can deal with these things, they break away from the conscious part of yourself and they go into their own little rooms, little boxes.
In the subconscious.
Deep in the subconscious. Now, that causes a separation with the self. You cannot be whole without all of your parts. So it became my mission after this dream I had to dig and dig. And so I started, reading up on it. And I did a lot of reading up on it. I got a couple of courses and diagrams, and I said, you know what? I know what I need to do. All this stuff is just that I'm reading and all these workbooks that I'm supposed to do. I need to just dive in. So I tied a 2x4 to my butt, and I dove into it. And it's a very dark place. And I could hear it sometimes, emotional echoes and crying and help me, I'm lost kind of thing. And so I just had to navigate through that till I collected all my parts.
Did you do that all on your own without a therapist or anything? Wow.
Then I had to, once I found them, and some of them might even still be hiding, I'm not sure yet. I had to convince them to trust me to bring them into the light. And that was even harder to do. As a kid, I was pretty sharp. I was, streetwise in the suburbs, okay? And I was gifted with storytelling abilities. I always wanted to write. But the anxiety just doesn't permit me to spend more than 1 or 2 pages on something and then it's gone. That part of me is the part that I'm trying to bring back to myself so that it doesn't run away when I start hitting.
May I ask, when you were doing that shadow work, how did you do it? Were you seated in silence, or?
Sometimes I'd be watching TV and stuff would pop up, or I'd be sitting there. I can't go to sleep without the TV on. I need the white noise. So if I'm in total darkness and total quiet, my brain it's all over the map and I can't sleep. So I always have the TV on. And sometimes it's things in dreams. And part of me always kind of knew the part of me that, ran away from this or ran away from that because of the age I was at when it happened. When my mother broke my arm with her shoe, I knew I was 11 years old. And that 11-year-old was in grammar school. I was in the 6th grade. And I walked around school with a cast on my arm. And I just would hide in the doorways because everybody was staring at me. And, so I had to find the hidey part of me, the part that hides. And that part, you might think I'm a very gregarious personality, the way I've been out and about here, but before I was nothing but a wallflower. I didn't want to be seen. I didn't want that.
So what brought about the change?
Well, I had this dream. And I was in my early 20s actually, but I never have ever forgotten it. And the first image is I am in an underground parking lot where there had been a massive explosion. Cars were overturned on top of each other, pillars were cracked, and everything was just all over the place. And then there was this debris and this ash. Think Terminator for a minute, the way he just kind of hit and everything went a little wonky. So, there was no straight line to anything. Everything was just piled up on top of each other. And as the dust and smoke cleared, I looked up and there was just this little bitty beam of light. No bigger than the head of a pin. But I saw it. And I started climbing. And I just kept climbing. And like I said, nothing is a straight line. And neither is our journey. It's not a straight line. It has many different offshoots. And that's what all the pillars were, that were catty cornered and on top of each other. And then at some point they'd have an end, and then you'd go on to another one. So the light would keep shifting, and I would just keep following the light.
Wow. Wow.
And I never stopped. I made a lot of mistakes during the way, but when you have no one to talk to, the only one I could ever really talk to was my grandfather. He was a very cool guy, John Jay. He was a coal miner and also a bootlegger. And he had fathered 19 kids. And he worked for the coal mining company, so that when you worked for a company, you had a house to live in. When you didn't, you lived in the fields in tents. That's where my mother was born. And he was, he was a union organizer, which put him at great fiscal risk. He went up against the Pinkertons. And in the meantime, he made moonshine to... He had 6 different stills all around the mountains there in Uniontown, Pennsylvania, but only one where he made it. All the others were places where he'd drop them off. And he'd drop them off at different places all the time, and then he'd break one down, and he never got caught. He was smart. And in his older years, he had black lung, which is what he eventually died from, respiratory. And he was in his 80s, but we used to go to visit my Aunt Joan, who brought him from Uniontown to live with her and her husband, my Uncle Tom. And I used to go there with them, and I would hang out with my grandfather. Now, my aunt painted everything, including the hinges to doors, so the basement, you could literally eat off the floor. It was battleship gray and everything. Even the coal chute door was painted. But my grandfather would collect newspapers, and he'd save them till I came. And we'd bring them upstairs in the wagon, and we'd walk down. He'd hold my hand, and he'd hold the wagon, and we'd walk down to the guy. The guy would buy them, and then we'd walk back up the hill. Thank God the heavy part was going downhill. And we'd go to the corner store, and he'd buy his bottle of Shenley, his pint of Shenley, and his 6-pack of Schlitz. And I would have my 2 cans of Pepsi and 2 bags of potato chips. And we'd go upstairs to his apartment, because it was a 2-family, but not separate entrances. It was all one entrance. We'd sit by the window, and his backyard, he was one of the few that had actually grass and a yard back there. And we'd always sit there and watch the robins bounce around on the grass. We never said a word to each other.
Oh my gosh.
We had the most comfortable silence.
That's unusual.
And he used to call me his Stada Baba. And he could hear them fighting in the other room, and that's why we'd go into the kitchen and close the doors. And I asked him one day what that meant. He says, "You're too young to be so old."
Oh.
He was Austrian, and my grandmother was Czechoslovakian. And they met in the United States and married in 19... I still have their original wedding photo in the original frame and all that. I don't know what I'm going to do with it after I pass away. Donated to the Smithsonian. But so anyway, back to the subject at hand. He was my anchor, and I was 14 when he died. And back in those days in the Catholic Church, you literally had to sit in the funeral parlor with the dead body for 3 days for about 12 hours, and then go through the whole. And it was torture for me to sit there and look at him. I couldn't even look at him. And everybody's wailing and crying, and then they're arguing over there how much money is left. And I sometimes ask myself, why was I born to these people? They had they were all so broken and sad and full of fear. And you just sometimes have that when it happens to you so young, it's by osmosis, you just absorb it. You don't have anything positive going on to balance or to push it away. So that's another part of the journey, was accepting that I didn't have those things.
Mm-hmm. What brought you to Baja?
Well, okay, via California, which I went to first. And then one day, it was after the 2008 recession, I lost my job. Not that it was much of a job anyway, but, it was income, and I got unemployment, and I was the first wave of people to get laid off. So I got all 99 weeks during that period of time, which I was very grateful for, but it wasn't enough to pay my rent and my car loan. So I started a little, I'll do anything for a buck kind of business. I would drive people to their doctor's appointments. Mostly, I lived in a 55 plus building in Escondido, and I would take the elderly people to their doctor's appointments, take them shopping, pick up their medication, and I did some cleaning houses. I had 2 55 plus community places I went to. So one day, I'm at one of my clients' house, and he calls me over to the computer, and he says, "Look at this place," and it turned out to be where Pickett is right now. I mean, there was advertising, apartments for
So
rent
here
there.
in Rosarito, Southern Rosarito.
And it was $350 a month, and I'm saying, are you kidding me? Well, this was 2012. Okay, the economy hadn't recovered, and so Baja or Rosarito just hadn't recovered at all. I mean, you saw all the abandoned projects,
Right.
That some of them are still there,
Still standing, incomplete.
exactly. And at least they got rid of that crane over there on that one top of that one building.
Yes.
But anyway, so he made arrangements with the person who posted to come down. I said, "Can I join you?" And funny thing, he said, "Sure, take the ride with me." And I had always wanted to come down here, but nobody wanted to go with me in my little tiny California circle there. So as I'm getting ready to meet up with him the day we were going, something told me to bring my checkbook, and something told me to bring proof of income. So I did that. So we get down and meet up with the person who drove us down, and we looked at the place. Of course, it was nothing like the pictures. The pictures were like 25 years old, but there was something about the place. And the woman who we met up with showed us the apartment he was looking at. And I walked in there, and it's right on the ocean. I mean, right there. And there was that one, and then there was one downstairs. So, the guy I was with, he was very interesting and strange individual. He could drive you nuts with the number of questions that in the lengthy conversation, he just kept talking like I do. And so she was getting very annoyed with him. And so I said, "You had another place. Can you show me that one?" And so it was down on the ground floor. And I didn't like it as much, but I wanted to be here. So I talked with her for a little bit. I showed her I had my W whatever from Social Security, so she could see how much I get every month. And I had my checkbook, so I gave her a deposit. Turns out she didn't want to rent to that guy up there. So we were emailing back and forth, and I said, "I'd really rather have the one that you don't want to rent to him." She says, "Well, I have several dogs up here." And I said, "That won't bother me." So anyway, I got that, and on June 1st, 2012, I packed up as much as I could put in my car, which I still have that car. It's 20 years old.
The same car.
The same car. And I brought down as much, and I had a neighbor check, my cats, my Joey and my Sweet Pea. And it was June 1st, so of course it was May, gray, June gloom, and it was cold, and I just sat out on that patio, and I just stared at that ocean. And then I drove home, and over, I guess maybe 6 weeks, I moved everything down, including the cats. Didn't work out so well for Joey, because the fleas love him, and he escaped on me. He got so badly bitten up and everything. But anyway, that was my first place.
Linda, may I ask you, because I can't wait, what was the point where you sort of rose up through the ashes? What?
Wow, okay, so this has been, through my time here, and I've been here 12 and a half years, okay? I have volunteered in various, this is how I met Mary.
Yeah.
It was, Hearts of Baja, I believe, was first. Then simultaneously to Cruz Roja when Lana Jordan was board president. Then those kept me running. Then I went to work at the store 2 days a week. Then I had bought a camera when I first had moved out, and I used to photograph 30 years ago. And then I stopped. But the sunsets were just so glorious. I invested in a simple camera because I had to relearn a lot of things, and this was digital, so it's going to take a little time. But I've always been blessed with an eye for composition. So I would take all these photos, and through Marilyn Witt, I found that I needed to be on Facebook. And that's how I was able to start connecting with people in groups. I would see that people were going, say, to First Friday up there at Porta Valle, and I'd seen pictures of it, so I took my camera, and my camera was what I could hide behind. So in my mind, I was being semi-invisible. And I would just take pictures of everybody doing the fun things, and then I started to relax, because it was the one place in the world where I actually got hugs every time I showed up. I never got hugs when I was a kid, except from my animals. So that just kept drawing me in more. And next thing you know, I'm running 7 days a week here. I hooked up with somebody to do promotions with. Didn't go well in the long run, but I put on a number of different events for charities at Los Amigos mostly. And I just started to, all of a sudden I had all these people that I knew and that knew me and knew who I was and responded to this was something that never happened to me before. And then one day...
Well, it sounds like you had really created a community
finally.
And sort of a family in a sense.
An extended family. So all of a sudden now it's 2018 and Six and Rachel descend upon the scene with their Blues Against Hunger, which is where I met Berta. God rest her soul. I got the very, very first picture of Berta behind the merchandising table that was ever taken, where she was handing back change to a little toddler whose mother was holding her up. And that was so Berta, so perfect. Anyway, so I was taking pictures for Hearts of Baja. They were the beneficiary of the food that was being collected. And I couldn't photograph the musicians very well because there was too much shadow up there on the stage, so I was doing all the people. So that location ended abruptly, and we went to Vista Hermosa, which was Bobby's by the Sea at the time. And the photographer that they were using didn't want to do it because they had a big beef with Bobby or whatever. Typical drama. So Rachel reached out to me and asked me and offered to pay me. And I said, now ain't this funny? So anyway, I said sure, and I went there and I started photographing it. And the music was awesome. I think I have photographed over the 4 years I did it at pretty much every musician that has been here, some 100 times. And so I felt a lot more connected than I've ever really felt, but still sometimes the nose is still pressed up against the pain, but it's gotten a lot better. So, that involvement did a great deal for my self-esteem. And next thing you know, I'm 70 years old. I'm like, how did this happen? And I recognized that there was still a part of me that was so detached from myself. And by that time, I was so burned out. My last event I threw for Maureen Minahan for her feral cat program, and it was my birthday, my 70th birthday, so Rachel and Six played. We got some cats adopted, made the bar money, and it was not long after that, I think in the following September, just before COVID, I had crashed. I just crashed. And I was exhausted. So the year of the quarantine, I found that there was a lot more shadow work to do. And so I did it. And 2021, I went back to Blues Against Hunger and stayed there. So in looking back, and then I left them in 2023, my eyesight in my right eye is pretty much gone. So it wasn't the photographing that was the problem, it was the editing tires out my good eye. And it was a big demand to get the photos like the next day, and I don't want to work like that. I need to take time. So the mantle got passed to Kathy Fatika, who was the perfect person to take it. And I realized one day I had this huge amount of people in my life, and several of them have passed away, like Berta passed away, Machado, Shannon Miller passed away. Just recently, Marcus passed away. A couple of the musicians have passed away. Those are losses I never had before, except for my grandfather and my brother and my mother and father. So I'm starting to see how the community kind of came together, and that people valued my presence and my sense of humor. And And I stood by there one day and I said to myself, I've come a lot further than I ever thought I ever really would. And I felt like I had risen up.
Wow. What would you advise the little 11-year-old girl? What would you advise?
My 11-year-old?
Yes. What would you advise?
If you could say something to her today.
Come on home, baby. The whole world is waiting for you.
Oh, that's beautiful. And that's a wonderful way to end this, too.
Thank you.
Thank you, Linda.
Thank you, ladies, for giving me a chance to share it. I just hope I can planted a seed for someone else to find their way.
Thank you, Linda.
Now all I have to do is find my purpose in life, and maybe by the time I'm 90, you'll know.
Yes. I think before then.
I hope so. I'm hoping that this is the year where all the work is going to bring the things that I have been missing in my life to me.
Oh, I pray for that for you too.
To be in love.
Oh, I hope that will happen for you.
No cohabitating though.